In adventuring, there was one cardinal rule. Never split the party. Unfortunately, not everyone cared for the rules. Through the window of the log cabin, the witch Norui deliberated over the ankle-deep snow, then scrutinized the clouds. Whatever she read in them steeled her resolve. I'll go on ahead, and I'll meet you all at South Point. Disagreement was inevitable, and her primary resistance was the group's swordarm and battlecaster, Hanjo Volpez.
Not a chance, Norui.
He shot back, lashing his imp-like tail.
We barely got through that last fight in one piece.
His boots still had the blood spatters to show for it.
When we go take the sleds together. If the weather's good, it won't be more than a week.
That's too slow. I can be there in 3 days on my own. Norui was adamant. We need to send word as quickly as possible. If there's really a spy in the Order, that ambush was only the beginning. Lives are at stake. Hanjo's thorny glare told her that he was unconvinced. She raised a brow at him, unimpressed. He must have realized she wasn't going to budge, because he turned his head to seek out the other members of the party to back him up. But the first, Zilla-Citron, would rather live in the here and now than squabble over the what-ifs and what-shoulds. If it didn't involve riddling her enemies full of arrows in battle, or, as now, propping her silver-speckled feet up and treating herself with a mug of hot whiskey tea, she wasn't interested. Meanwhile, the second, Sunji, feigned sleep by the fire, his small, draconic body curled up dog-like on a bed of his own cloak. Barely out of his boyhood years and timid among his more experienced companions, their scout did what he did best, spotted the conflict and avoided it. Hanjo then looked to Pip-Pip-Pop-Pip. The frog-like Morelli was the final member of their party and his sole remaining hope for assistance. And, if this argument had taken place even a week ago, then Hanjo might have counted on his support. But things had changed, and now Pip could barely look at Hanjo without rolling his eyes in disappointment and contempt. The swordsman scoffed as he gave up the effort. Gritting his teeth, Hanjo puffed himself up and declared,
"You can't go alone, that's final."
Turning to face him straight on, the witch's pale gold eyes lit up stubbornly. Norui spoke as if she were striving to be gentle for the sake of his feelings, but she allowed no bend in her words. "Mr. Hanjo, you do not get to make my decisions for me." Hanjo bristled at the rejection.
"Well, someone has to make the calls,"
he said. "Oh?" The gentleness boiled away from the witch's voice. "That's funny. I don't seem to recall us ever choosing a leader. In fact, all of us joined the Order at the same time, didn't we? It seems to me that we always talk through our choices and make our decisions accordingly." She wasn't wrong. They'd always been an egalitarian group, and that had worked just fine, up till now. But, for the first time, they were in an irreconcilable disagreement. Hanjo tried reasoning with her again.
"And you can't just make the decision for the rest of us. We need to stick together, our healer included."
"I most certainly can if it's the right thing to do," Norui asserted.
"But—"
Hanjo reached for a retort, but his hand grasped uselessly in the air. He must have realized by now his odds of persuading her were vanishingly small. If respect was a currency, he'd frittered away every coin in his pouch. How did he look through her eyes? Hanjo, who had pounced on the first chance for a fight with a monstrous creature on the roadway. Sunji, as it happened, who the healer had to then rescue from grievous injury. Hanjo, who'd hunted a mother deer and brought back its orphaned fawn like it was a delightful new pet, and the healer had broken down in tears for the poor creature. Hanjo, who had earlier that same day thought, wouldn't it be funny if I made an illusion to disguise our friend Pip as a zombie? And his prank had broken the healer's trust in him altogether. Norui was still sick with fury over it. Uncharitably, she labeled him impulsive, immature, awkward. Without a trace of compassion for his struggle, she watched him fumble to find any more convincing argument than "because I said so." If Hanjo expected her to trust in his judgment, he'd been playing his cards wrong for days. No, probably weeks. Regretting, Hanjo gave up words and tried a pleading look instead. It didn't land, and Norui turned to look out the window again. Slipping on her usual cheery smile, she said, "Besides, it's not as if I'm ever really alone. Lean will look after me." The white squirrel on her shoulder chittered his affirmation, but the reassurance of the witch's familiar didn't allay Hanjo's worries. Decision made, the witch fiddled with the small pouch at her belt. "I'll head out now, while there's still the whole afternoon to cover ground. Now, since I'll be gone, Let me leave a few healing tonics, in case you should run into anything. She began to draw out bottles of the bright golden potions that she spent all her spare evenings brewing up, one after another. Here, I've enough for 2 each, and this one for sickness. The bag at her side was too small for as many potions as she produced, but enchantment worked wonders.
Hold on now.
Their bright blue Norui companion chose to weigh in after all. Pip might not stand even a single meter at his tallest, but he had an outsized voice when he wanted to be heard, and he was booming with it now.
I think I like the idea of just ye and Liam going off. There's too much what could go wrong, and be honest, lass, can you make it that distance, that fast, and still be looking after your safety?
Liam barked out a hot retort, but Norui paused. She could admit it was an extreme distance for her. It must have been a decade since she attempted such a trip, and if it weren't for the fact that she knew her spell work could mend up her hurts and ease her fatigue, she didn't know if it would even be possible to do so quickly. But if she used all her mana healing herself, then she wouldn't have much left if she came across a dangerous situation on the way. But, while she'd never come forward about it, Norui had other reasons that she wanted to split off for this leg of the journey, reasons far more compelling to her than good sense, and ones she didn't want to make known to the others. So, Norui forced down her doubts and made her best attempt at an unworried nod. We'll make it work. Pip overrode her faked confidence with his genuine own, declaring,
Never you need, lass. I'll just come with you.
Pip pointed one webbed finger to the leather bag at her waist.
That bag of yours, what holds more on the inside? I can hitch a ride in there, yeah?
Norui stared dumbly down at the bag at her side. Could the little Norali fit his body in that? You could, she admitted. But there was no but. Pip was plenty small enough, and he was already moving the conversation onward as though the plan were set.
Right, I'll keep along then. Hold on,
Hanjo objected.
It's still too dangerous. Don't you worry, laddie. I'll keep her safe, promise.
Pip was firm in quashing the objection, but lightened up quickly to a smile.
Zilla and Sunji and Hanjo will see you at the safe house in South Point. Travel safe, do not get into any dumb fights.
Hanjo opened his mouth to argue, but Zilla swept over his words before he could sound them, setting aside her empty mug and rising from the fireside chair. Yes, friends, and you as well. Drinks on me when we meet again, yes? She had her usual easy grin and tugged at Hanjo's elbow. Come now, we've packing to do without delay. The faster we move, the faster we catch up. Norui, for her part, was also trying to protest, but already Pip was up on his tiptoes, reaching for the flap of her bag.
Lass, mind coming a wee bit closer? Thank ye.
He smiled as she stooped, bringing the satchel within easy reach. He fit in snugly, lower half disappearing into the mysterious depths of the bag, arms folded over the edge.
Well, I see, it's a fit. You think you can carry on with me here?
Him asking was a courtesy. There was no point in denying it. Norui smothered her dissatisfaction with a stiff nod.
Are you ready to be off, then?
The witch hadn't been able to break off from the party the way she'd hoped, but if it was just Pip, it was better than nothing, and she couldn't waste time fretting about it. Yes, Norui responded softly, fitting the goggles from atop her head over her eyes, and drawing up the hood of her cloak. Liam slipped inside the hood and curled around her neck, readying for the long journey ahead. A tug at the waist of her dress gave her pause. Sunji, ever quiet and skillful, had abandoned his napping pretense by the fire and crept up on her. He peered up at her with worried eyes.
Go soon, Norui and Pip?
The woman smiled and rested a hand on the scout's scaled head. Norui and Pip go now, she replied, but see Sunji again soon, at South Point. Sunji fidgeted his lizardly tail unhappily. Sunji go with Zilla and Hanjo. See you again soon, Norui insisted and bent to give Sunji a small kiss atop his head. Hissing happily, Sunji waved her and Pip farewell and scampered after the rest of the party. From the corner of her eye, Norui could see Hanjo's dark, displeased stare. She wondered if she ought to bid him goodbye as well. But frankly, she didn't feel much like talking to him after his awful prank. A week apart would do them both some good, and if he was smart, he'd have a proper apology for her when they met again in South Point so they could put it all behind them. Setting her lips, Norui only nodded after him and swept out the door. The winter cold bit at her nose, and she pulled her scarf up to mask her face. The short lilac waves of her hair bounced as she trotted down the log steps from the house and picked her way through the snowy path. She directed her attention again to the skies above. There were high clouds and a faint snowfall, but nothing that promised worse weather to come. Ready, Pip?
Aye.
Her small companion beamed up at her. A deep inhale from the witch, then a preliminary stretch of limbs, arms, legs, and one more set. Massive, white and gray dappled wings swept out from beneath the cleverly stitched and encircled folds of her cloak, reaching high and wide. Then, in a kickback of snow powder and an excited whoop from Pip, whoop! She swept upwards from the earth. 3 days to South Point. She could do this, and for the sake of the people in the Order depending on her, she had to. When the rest of the party arrived in South Point a week later, they found Pip half dead and hiding out in a stable, and Norui was gone. Never split the party.